I feel like I'm in class, but I actually like this class. All right, we're talking about Disney because during our tier lists, it became obvious that for some reason our chat just despises Disney. For no reason, they just really dislike Disney, and they couldn't back it up with anything except Disney sucks. We're gonna go over the top 5 Disney acquisitions. We're gonna go over why they bought them. So we're going to talk about acquisitions. An acquisition is essentially just when one company buys another company. There are really 3 reasons why a company buys another company. 1, they want to become a monopoly. What it is they want to reduce their competitors, right? If firm A is competing with firm B, firm A buys firm B, they no longer have any competitors. Facebook loves social media. Instagram was competing with social media with them in social media, so they just bought Instagram. Boo, no more competitors. Boom. Reason number 2, they want a specific product. Oculus, they wanted to go into VR, but they didn't have any VR products. So they just bought up a bunch of VR companies to gain their product. The third is kind of weird. It's to acquire the people. Let's say that all of the best marketers in the country go to Google. Let's say that you are starting a company and you want the best marketers in the world. You're gonna buy Google. Then boom, you get all the best marketers. All right, this man right here, remember the name. His name is Bob Iger. Bob Iger became CEO of Disney in 2005. He just retired last year in 2020. Top 5 Disney acquisitions. Number 5, Disney buys Pixar. So background, okay, we all know Pixar, right? Now Pixar movies make about $1 billion a year in box office, but then they make twice that in everything else. Mostly selling products like toys or video games or clothes, licensing. About 1/3 of all of Disney's money comes from just licensing their characters and their franchises and stuff. Does anyone know these 2 movies here on the left, Brother Bear and Treasure Planet? Whether or not you know these films, they sucked. They were really bad. In the 1990s, Disney was on a massive winning streak with animated movies, right? They were killing it. They did Aladdin and Lion King and Little Mermaid and Pocahontas and a bunch of these big names. They were doing hundreds of millions in worldwide box office each. They captured the imaginations of kids everywhere. They were selling a ton of merch, a ton of toys. They were making Disney billions. Let me get caught up. I know I'm gonna get a bunch of hate, aren't I? I'm not talking about the quality of the movie. I'm talking about the amount of money that it made, all right? We're talking about the revenue that it brought Disney. It's underrated, yes. What that means is it did not bring in a lot of money. Brother Bear is also a good movie. It did not do well, okay? Did not do well in the box office. No one was buying the Brother Bear video game. No one was buying the Treasure Planet clothes or toys, right? Movies on the left, early 2000s. Movies on the right, late 90s. Movies on the left, doing terrible. Movies on the right, doing really well in terms of money. Why was no one watching Brother Bear in movies? Why was no one buying Treasure Planet merch? It's because they were all watching Pixar movies. They were all going and watching Finding Nemo in the theater. They were all buying the Toy Story game, the Bugs Life merch. Bob Iger from before, he took over again in 2005, and he talks about this period of time a lot in his autobiography, and he says that in his first year as the CEO, he spent a lot of time at Disneyland in LA because he wanted to talk to Disney fans, to talk about what was it about Disney that they liked and what was it about Disney that they wish could be better. He was watching this Disney parade, and he noticed that in the parade in Disneyland, there wasn't a single character on any of the floats that had been made in the last 10 years. It was all Simba from Lion King and Aladdin and Tinkerbell and Peter Pan and Pinocchio and Little Mermaid and Pocahontas. It was all their iconic 90s stuff, but none of it was their new stuff. The new stuff really wasn't hitting. So yeah, Disney animation, it was fading. It was hurting a lot, and it was hurting the whole company. It was hurting its reputation, its revenue, and Disney was sliding into possible irrelevancy. Who was the CEO of Pixar at the time? It was Steve Jobs, which a lot of people don't realize this, that basically Steve Jobs got pushed out of Apple. He got fired by Apple, and Lucasfilms, which is George Lucas's company, they made Star Wars, they had a computer graphics division, which spun off and Steve Jobs bought that computer graphics division and turned it into Pixar. This was all like his side job while he was being fired from Apple. Like, I found that incredible that Steve Jobs, like, again, his side job is to like start Pixar. Like, this is a side thing for him, right? Bob Iger goes to Steve Jobs and says, I'm gonna buy Pixar off of you. And Steve Jobs says, no, get out of here. Absolutely not. He refuses to sell Pixar. Bob Iger does not take no for an answer. Eventually, he sells it. A lot of convincing reasons, but mostly, as we know, there were 7.4 billion convincing reasons why he sold Pixar. So that's the number 5. Cool story, right? Cool story. Number 4, the 4th coolest, or in my opinion, most impactful Disney purchases, Star Wars. This is me. Both of these pictures are me at the Star Wars land in Disneyland in LA. This is a really cool story. I'm not gonna lie. How Disney bought Star Wars is a really cool story. And this is where a lot of the animosity came from in the tier list stream, where people didn't like Disney, as they were talking about how Disney fluked with the sequels, which sure, they did. But again, you know my opinion, you can't take out a couple bad movies and say the whole company is bad because they made 3 bad films. Early 2000s was here. Disney realized they needed to grow or they're gonna die. They laid out this long-term plan. The first part was to buy Pixar. Wow, Darth Vader's tall. Also the visor. All right, calm down, calm down. No, yeah, Darth Vader's tall, right? I'm not short. I'm not short. Darth Vader's just unusually tall. Okay, let's make that clear. Darth Vader was like 7 foot, okay? Which makes me at least like 6 foot in this picture, right? They drew up a list of 3 companies that Disney needed to acquire in order to see their growth. Number 1 was Pixar. Number 3 was Star Wars. So they initially prioritized the other company, number 2, largely in part because they were convinced that George Lucas would never sell Star Wars. So they said, focus on the other company. Once we have the other company under our belt, George Lucas will be more likely to sell Star Wars. And that's exactly what happened. They were 100% right. But basically, they buy the other company, which we'll get to next, and they develop the other company for a couple of years. And then Bob Iger still was too scared to talk to George Lucas. And Steve Jobs calls Bob Iger. Steve Jobs, this is like a year before he dies. He is like later in his cancer. He calls Bob Iger and says, give George Lucas a call. He says, trust me, call George Lucas and buy Star Wars. Takes him out to dinner and says, look, I want to be real with you, George. He says, I'm going to pull up the exact quote. Okay, this is a quote from Bob Iger's book. Quote, I don't want to be fatalistic, George, and please stop me if you would rather not have this conversation. But I think it's worth putting this on the table. What happens down the road? You don't have any heirs who are going to run the company for you. They may control it, but they're not going to run it. Shouldn't you determine who protects or carries on your legacy? End quote. That was Bob Iger's pitch to George Lucas. Apparently that was convincing enough for George Lucas. I mean, he also had 4 billion other reasons to be convinced, absolutely. But, you know, that whole legacies thing apparently was convincing. And as you can see here, Mickey Mouse became Darth Vader's daddy, is basically what happened. And they asked him why. And it turned out that for years, he'd been talking to Steve Jobs, who told him all about how Disney handled Pixar. Steve Jobs basically advocated on behalf of Disney to George Lucas, saying, look, they bought Pixar and they did a great job with Pixar. They treat Pixar great. I would highly recommend that you let them buy Star Wars. I think it's interesting that Steve Jobs went from literally saying, F you, no, you cannot buy Pixar, to all of a sudden becoming such a strong advocate for other companies to sell themselves to Disney. They identified 3 companies to buy. Number 1 was Pixar, which they did. Number 3 was Star Wars, where they said if in order for you to get Star Wars, you have to buy number 2. Number 2 was Marvel. It's insane when you look at these numbers. So if you can believe it, a Marvel movie also makes just as much money in the box office as a Pixar movie, but Marvel makes more than 1 movie a year. That's the difference, right? Pixar makes about 1 movie a year. Marvel is putting out 2, 3, even 4 Marvel movies a year. And each one is making, as we know, record box office numbers and tons of merch and stuff. It's crazy, right? When you think about the worth of Marvel and you think they bought it for 4 billion, why? I think what makes Marvel the 3rd best on this list is how smart it was. The Disney acquisition of Pixar it was pretty clear, right? That was very easy. Disney was doing terrible. Pixar is doing great. Let's buy Pixar. Boom, easy. Star Wars one, also very easy. They did 6 movies already, one of the biggest franchises in the world. Buy it, easy. At the time, Marvel was not doing well. It was 2009, okay? The only movie they had released was Iron Man 1. But more importantly, most of their IP, their intellectual property, so like the licensing rights to most of their characters were already licensed out in these long-term contracts. And so they thought super long-term, right? They built this whole expanded cinematic universe that led to an insane amount of money, insane amount of merch, and insane amount of box office sales. Fun fact, they bought Marvel for $4 billion. Endgame made $3 billion in box office alone. Just that one movie alone, just the box office, not even the merch, not even the games and stuff. Just the box office made nearly as much as the cost for Disney to buy the entire franchise. Number 2, this one probably won't mean a lot to a lot of people because it's about sports. Basically, Disney bought football. That is essentially how it worked. Disney bought sports. They bought ESPN in 1996 for $19 billion, which sounds like a lot. It is a lot, right? It sounds like a lot. At the time, it was a ton. This is $20 billion 1996 dollars, which is worth a lot more than today, right? Inflation. For a majority of time, though, up until like let's say the last 10 years, ESPN was really the primary place where anyone interacted with sports at all. They're worth $50 billion now. I don't watch much of ESPN though. I just watch games on Twitch and YouTube. Exactly, Static, and that is a problem for Disney that they really lucked out on, okay? Because we'll get to this in number 1. But yeah, ESPN is falling. It's absolutely falling. Their worth is going down like crazy because people aren't watching ESPN anymore, right? They're watching YouTube TV, which has live sports, or Hulu, which has live sports. And so ESPN is slipped. So what happens when they're losing money on one of their largest investments? The number 1 acquisition, which is also the most recent, is what happens. And this is where we can have a conversation about antitrust and monopolies, okay? Because what Disney decides to do is they decide to buy Fox. So they bought Fox for over $70 billion. And with that, they bought Fox, and they bought Hulu, and they bought National Geographic. Now you have to ask, how does that solve their ESPN issue? Well, there's this organization in the United States called the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. They oversee all of the laws on all things media. And they have this very important rule. It's really their only anti-monopoly rule. They say that no one company can own more than one of the 4 major broadcasting companies. Disney owns ABC, and Fox owns Fox. So the FCC said you can't buy all of 21st Century Fox because you can't buy the Fox Broadcasting Company. That's against our rules. So they said, okay, here's how we'll do it. Disney's gonna take all of the media stuff and Fox is gonna keep all of the sports stuff. So the FCC said if you wanna buy Fox, you can't buy Fox News or Fox Sports, and you have to give up 30% of your ownership of ESPN. You have to sell it. And Disney's like, bet. Disney's like, if you insist, fine. Because Disney, again, like you said, Static, Disney is losing money on ESPN. They need to get out fast. Well, this is the share of box office revenue in 2017. Every dollar that was being spent on movies. The dark blue is Disney. The light blue is Fox. The yellow is everything else. Literally everything else. And now they've merged. So this one company, Disney, owns 47.9% of all of the box office revenue. And every other company that is making a movie owns the other 52.1%. That is a monopoly, in my opinion. That is a monopoly. Okay, but why? Why do they do this? Because when they went to go buy Fox, they didn't know they were gonna luck out by losing ESPN, right? That was just luck. Why? And it has to do with what you guys are talking about, the Hulu stuff. Let's say Disney makes a movie like Frozen. Okay, they put Frozen in the movie theaters, they make a bunch of money, right? Then how are they going to continue to make money off of Frozen after it's it's out of the movie theaters. Up until 2010, it's easy. You make it in a DVD or a VCR and you sell the DVDs or the Blu-rays and the VCR, right? But nowadays, you license the movie to Netflix, or you license the movie to Amazon Prime, or you license the movie to Hulu, right? So Netflix is paying you money to have Frozen on Netflix. Every time you watch Frozen on Netflix, Netflix is getting a majority of that money, and Disney is getting a very small share. So Disney was sick of Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and all these streaming platforms stealing their money, because they were the king of Blu-ray and DVD. They were the king of physical distribution. They had zero online digital streaming distribution. And that's why, for example, The Office is no longer on Netflix. NBC is launching their own streaming platform. You hate that it's the most watched thing on Netflix ever, because your effort and your show is making Netflix billions of dollars, and you're getting chump change. So Disney was like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna launch Disney Plus. We're gonna launch our own streaming platform, because we're sick of losing money to Netflix, and we're sick of losing money to Amazon Prime and Hulu. But the problem was, they don't have enough movies. To make a full, comprehensive digital streaming platform, one that could rival Netflix, or one that could rival Amazon, they just did not have enough content. And so they looked at this graph, and they said, there's only one other company that is making just as much movies as we are. So they went and bought Fox, just so they could put all the Fox stuff on Disney Plus. If you look at the Disney Plus advertisements, it's full of stuff like The Simpsons, or National Geographic, or Family Guy. That's all Fox stuff that if they had not bought Fox, they just could not have put on there. If you want to rival Netflix, you need to do literally half of all movies being made. That's what they did, right? That's what this graph is showing. Half of every single dollar being spent on the movies, Disney. And they're putting on Disney Plus. One, they removed Hulu as a competitor, right? If the whole idea was to launch Disney Plus, if you're Disney Plus, you're competing with Netflix, with Hulu, with Amazon Prime. But now by buying Fox, it's a 2-for-1, right? You double your content catalog, you double the size of Disney Plus, and you remove Hulu as a competitor. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it a lot. That was Marketing Monday. It was fun. I mean, again, we'll talk about it in the Discord. I'm curious on your guys' opinion. So if you have an opinion on whether you like this or not, definitely let me know, comments or whatever. Yeah, I hope it was informative. I hope it was fun. I hope it was, I don't know, not like sitting in a class. I'd love, insight on how you guys think I can make it more engaging or entertaining, funny, anything. But yeah, I don't want it to be like sitting in a class.